One night I had a frightful dream, in which I met my grandmother under the sea. She lived in a phosphorescent palace of many terraces, with gardens of strange leprous corals and grotesque brochet efflorescences. She welcomed me with a warmth that may have been sardonic. She had changed as those who take to the water change, and told me she had never died, but instead she had gone to a spot her dead son had learned about, and had leaped to a realm whose wonders, destined for him as well, he had spurned through the taking of his own life. This was to be my realm too. I could not escape it. I would never die, but would live with those who had lived since before man ever walked the earth. In Conan lore, there is an extreme amount of overlap with the Cthulhu mythos, as they share the same classical weird fiction universe. Nowhere is that better represented than in the ageless hybrid beings known as fishmen to most, and dwellers in the deep to Dagon cultists. While we also covered these creatures in our second Gods of Conan podcast, entitled Beast Gods of Beast Men, today we'll be going in-depth into their culture, biology, and the unique role they play in the Hyborian Age. This is your guide to Deep Ones in Conan. We'll begin by going over their creation as a race, and finish by covering their undersea cities, said to exist during the time of high adventure. As always, our clearly labeled source list is linked below the chapters of this video, and clarification will be made when theory crafting is present. Now let us journey beneath the waves as we begin. Grimdark. Half off! Before man was young, and beyond the stars, a great civil war was fought by beings incomprehensible. Those who lost this war were referred to as Great Old Ones. The most famous of the star-spawned subrace of Great Old Ones being High Priest Cthulhu, who came like a comet and shot down beneath the waves. From here, he established a connection to powers beyond space, existing both at the far bottom of the Western Sea and in the sunken city of Ryla beneath the stars, to slowly recover his power. Seeing humans as unfit for service under him, he took material from fish, amphibians, and Shoggoth to form the first of his greater servants, later known as Lord Dagon to his worshippers and Father of the Deep Ones. This title was literal, as Deep Ones were created for the full conversion of the human race by a freshly beaten Cthulhu. This also explains the inclusion of Shoggoth tissue in the creation of Dagon. Shoggoth are beings which possess no true form, being genetically engineered by beings who made up the winners of the Civil War. They were originally created as the perfect slaves, which explains their use here in trying to improve what the Great Old One in question likely viewed as the human formula. Deep Ones, including Dagon, being a truly hybrid race, are unable to produce offspring with each other, which is shown by the creation of Mother Hydra, Dagon's daughter and concubine. She would be the second ever Deep One in existence, and due to stories we have seen of Deep One sorcerers, like in The Fisherman at Falcon Point, being more female than male, we can assume she would grow very talented in the ways of elder magic. This is the foundation of what would become the various cults and orders of Dagon, which will be covered in this video. Cthulhu as the creator deity, giving them purpose, Dagon as the father, giving them power, and Hydra as the mother, giving them hidden knowledge. While these are the core three gods of the Deep Ones, throughout their history they have had a myriad of minor gods in their localized undersea pantheons. These beings can be thought of as different interpretations of the core three gods, or their own depending on the ideas in any particular Deep One city. Uluath, in most cases, is clearly a more squid-like lesser child of Cthulhu, referred to as an undergod or star spawn, which can be summoned through the uttering of specific ultrasonic frequencies, causing him to rise to the surface and wreak havoc before being destroyed through traditional means, only to recover for when the Deep Ones of his specific worshipping cult need him later. As star spawns can be thought of as the little brothers and sisters of Cthulhu, this would make Uluath a kind of lesser Olympian figure relative to Deep One society. Murgor is a demon god known to make frequent deals with the Deep Ones for power in exchange for the souls of humans, which he requires to survive. He appears as a great dark humanoid giant with red bug-like eyes, capable of emitting rays of light which consume souls. Since Deep Ones are inherently designed to lower the human population by conversion, it isn't hard for them to adopt this dark god. He is most famous for launching an assault on the capital of Aquilonia, Old Tarantia, only being stopped by Prince Khan, whose father, King Conan, soon ordered the destruction of catacombs being used as his conduit to this plane. Last of the directly mentioned lesser gods is Tsongthua, who is yet another great old one. When one understands that this god's chief quality is laziness and that deep ones are ageless beings, it would be easy to see them adopting him as something of a god of patience. However, he is mentioned the least when minor gods are brought up in relation to the fishmen. The only thing that can be said for certain is that due to his relation to the area that would one day become the country of Hyperborea 2 million years before the age of Conan, it is likely that any undersea city that venerates him would be off of the northern coast of Vanaheim, as it is the closest area of truly open water or under the oceans of the northern Viliet Sea. Now let's move on to deep ones themselves. A fully developed Deep One hybrid freshly sheds the last of their human features as they awaken around their late 20s into their early 30s, which is the age range we can confirm Olmsted to be during the Shadow over Innsmouth. Since Deep One bloodlines are all over the world, the height of the Deep One depends on both their age and previous human size. It should be mentioned that in the Hyborian age, brutish men, or genetically normal men twice the size of normal humans, are born. This is a healthier form of natural gigantism that would leave humanity at some point during ancient times after the Hyborian age. While later artists' depictions have altered Deep One aging to make them look more mer-like, as they age, nothing in the lore seems to support this. Thus, we can assume that dwellers in the deep remain in their half-human, half-frog-like shape with extended hopping motions on land due to elongated lower legs, despite being heavily altered by their dormant genes coming to the surface while increasing in size as they eat. Deep ones have been known to shrink to conserve energy during starvation, and overeating or gorge feeding tends to accelerate growth rather than add fat. This means that, likely due to the inclusion of Shoggoth tissue in his creation, even Father Dagon will not stop growing until the end of the universe. A deep one could also tactically shrink themselves down to the size of a goldfish to infiltrate a human area, only to feed off of different vermin in a seaside castle to regain their larger size over the course of a year and become a threat. Dagon's blood is strong, and thus the fish-like features become more pronounced as the Deep One ages. This is likely why many artists have altered the depiction of older Deep Ones to have a fish-like lower body. While not canon, it is a very fair interpretation when one wants to represent the age of one of these beings, especially when you consider that size alteration can simply occur through starvation and malnutrition, so it's not really a sign of aging. So just as a narrative tool, it might be useful in your campaign. The most common Deep One skin colors, when it comes to the common phenotypes at least, range from blue, green, and gray. The skin is sometimes scaled and other times smooth, but always slime-covered. This slime very likely comes from their amphibian lineage, similar to the slime secreted by giant screaming frogs, which can be useful for getting away from the clutches of an enemy. They have full fish-like heads with amphibian croaking mixed with their already existing human vocal cords to produce a distinct froggish accent which creates a disgust reaction in even unawakened hybrids of their own bloodline. Their hands and feet are webbed, and both, due to their natural athleticism that comes from swimming as their primary mode of travel, mixed with being capable of enduring extreme ocean pressure which could crush even the strongest of men, they possess immense strength and stamina. While preferring not to come onto land, Deep Ones continue to possess lungs even as their gills manifest. When one considers their hyper-adaptive lineage and dramatic diversity of habitats, this means they can breathe air, fresh water, salt water, as well as types of air that may kill normal humans. Deep Ones primarily are made to be compatible with human breeding, but also possess the ability to interbreed with fish, octopi, and amphibians. This is another large contributing factor to their various appearances. Obviously, these Deep Ones would not have a humanoid body shape in their first phase of life. However, since these creatures get their form from Dagon and not from their fish parent, we can assume a minimum of limbs resembling the structure of a frog's morphology, similar to human hybrids when reaching full maturity. All Deep Ones possess bulging lidless eyes out of proportion with the rest of their face, and their thin lips barely hide shark-like serrated teeth. Deep Ones have shown several times to be able to use elder magic. Given their partially human heritage and anthropology of Shoggoth Taming, this would very likely include an ability to use the elder sign to weaken or ward off outside threats. Despite their toughness, Deep Ones can still be killed by physical damage, including fire, steel, and normal methods of execution. Due to factors you'll see demonstrated later in this video, the children of Mother Hydra are also very susceptible to mental illness. If you'd like to keep yourself inoculated to mental health issues, a great way is to have a hobby, which is what tabletop gaming is for many of the people watching this video. You can stay sane in this crazy fish frog world by going to Ronin Kraft on Etsy. Ronin Kraft is an independent 3D printing business known for its excellent customer service, staying in touch with you while you place your order. Whether your interests are in sci-fi or fantasy, you'll find quality that surpasses any master. The primary way established undersea societies interact with humans to continue their lineage is through deals which result in the founding of Dagon cults. In exchange for betraying their race, the humans in question receive plentiful food and riches from the ocean floor, which the Deep Ones can afford to part with, as they have no concept of property among themselves, outside referring to things as belonging to the people of the sea, in quotes. The result is a dramatic net gain for the Fishman party, with immediate short-term gain for the human party. Over time, the human group effectively becomes a nesting ground gene pool for the creation of future fishmen. You can contextualize a Deep One hybrid that looks fully human as the tadpole form of that race, and of course the beast variants, a squid, a fish, a frog, same thing. They haven't achieved a Deep One form yet, but of course staying genetically similar is less relevant at that stage. Despite their eventual metamorphosis and common struggles of living, maintaining their cover often requires their members to take on the required civic duties of their host nation, which can include going to war. There have been many cases of Deep Ones seeking to escape, reject, or simply delay embracing their heritage by using this as a cover to leave behind their past. Deep One hybrids have also been known to reproduce before fully transforming, accidentally creating offshoots of Deep One bloodlines not connected to the original cult community. This mixing with different human and animal bloodlines, plus the rate of mutation common for their race, can be thought of as being responsible, in part, for the various Deep One phenotypes we will be going over later in the video. Regardless of their choices, the visions, which accompanied by extreme trauma make them susceptible to mental illness, begin, flooding them with the ancestral psychic memories of their specific bloodline and a primal urge to return to the ocean from whence they came, as their blood and their body begins to go through its second puberty. These visions and compulsions start as vivid dreams, becoming more intense over time as the body sheds its human form. The development of gills likely coincides with the call of the sea. While this bodily change is different for every Deep One in terms of its length and what generally transforms first, we can break down the metamorphosis into 4 general stages. In stage 1, between the ages of birth to human puberty, the hybrid is fully human in appearance. In stage 2, between the ages of human puberty to their late 20s, they develop what can be called fish-like features in their teenage years, likely having bulging eyes, skin getting paler, lips getting thinner, and going bald very early in life. In stage 3, between their late 20s to early 30s, the full change takes place, taking anywhere between a few weeks to a year for the body to fully resemble a mature Deep One. Finally, stage 4, from their 30s onward, is about them developing more fish-like features until the only human thing left about them is the shape of their upper skeleton. While the psychological changes have been resisted before in Conan lore, the physical ones have not been, even if the person in question remains consciously human in majority. Such cases are not likely for the average sea dweller, as having family, the memories of one's ancestors, and the only beings you can relate to at this point in your life beneath the waves is usually enough to convince any newly developed stage 3 or 4 hybrid. However, there are cases where unwilling people are turned into fishmen through sorcery. This was the case in The Fisherman at Falcon Point, where we see a man save the life of a female Deep One, only for her to thank him by using her immense knowledge of sorcery to turn him from a man into one of her kind. This means that if you are desired enough by them, Even being unrelated to them by blood will not stop them from recruiting you to their side. Throughout their existence, we have seen many different manifestations of the fish-frog folk. There are the catfish-headed Murgor-related cults of southwestern Hyboria, which invaded Aquilonia. The traditional common ones found in the northwest during the Hyborian Age, represented in most of Lovecraft's tales. Northern Viliet Sea anglerfish, which can be found in the exiled lands of Conan exiles. Colorful tropical phenotypes found among the drowned off the coast of Stygia in the Isle of Sipta, and the mentally ill manfish living in the ruins of a sunken Volusian city. While usually I have something to say about these different subspecies, in this case they really are just phenotypes. The differences are cultural. They're more an expression of a gene rather than any heavy alteration to the gene itself. That's what a phenotype is. While one could argue the drowned have a unique history, being involved in the nightmare wars between the serpent men, demons, denizens of the dreamlands, and themselves, that's more the unique history of Sipta, which deserves its own video. The only real difference worth noting is that the adaptation of the drowned comes from being near the Maelstrom, which is a weather system on the Isle of Sipta connecting it as a physical portal to the dreamlands of Earth. It's a testament to the strength of this race that the only thing which changed was physical appearance when the same reality warping ecosystem caused devolution to occur in lycanthropes and even full demons manifested on the island. The primary Deep One body structure and intellect seems to come more from the Shoggoth and guided evolution aspects of Dagon, thus deep beasts, as we'll term them here, will grow in intellect as they go through their own metamorphosis, eventually resembling your OC Deep One enemies you made for a tabletop campaign, or one of the many regional phenotypes we've just mentioned. So don't worry about, oh, well, would they be more savage if they were animalistically born, or they were, oh, but your mother was a crab, good sir. How could you possibly have an intelligent cult? Well, the intellect comes from Dagon, and Dagon was able to make deals with people, so there you go. Due to this, we should always assume, just like with ape men, a near-limitless variation in appearance. This is one of the reasons I consider the lower fish body interpretation of some older or ancient Deep Ones to be a valid one. These Deep Ones, due to their highly adaptive nature, would also likely be able to grow lungs over time to adapt to the surface like their half-human siblings. While they may look different, the people of the sea all possess the same structure for interacting with humans, which when it grows large enough, becomes known as the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Esoteric merely means secretive, and Order is simply a more structured cult. While the version of this secret society that we see in the Shadow over Innsmouth wouldn't exist for over 10,000 years, the assumption can be made that a similar name would apply to all cults that develop a large enough hold over an already high population community. The Order functions as an evolutionary adaptation, as it is merely an avenue for interacting with humans, mating with them, and creating ritual sites for either the raising of their gods or outposts to further their war against man. After the initial taking of the three oaths and adoption into the cult, the norms within merely exist to support Aqua supremacy. The internal hierarchy would likely resemble a loose collection of worshippers, a priest skilled in the summoning of Dagon, and any Deep One sorcerers that may be present, serving in an extra priestly role as assistants. Once the deal has been struck with the Fish Father for the desired thing needed by the human or humans in question, the first oath the human must take is the Oath of Secrecy. This means they can tell no one outside of the cult or community about their affairs or rituals under penalty of death. This is also why every instance of having Deep One families and stories are secretive to a hostile degree with the human visitors. For them, keeping them from prying into their affairs is literally a matter of life and death. It's a declaration of war which they will react to accordingly in most cases. Second is the Oath of Assistance. Any non-hybrid, meaning fully human member, must always give aid to Deep Ones. This means giving them shelter, food, and anything they may need to further the cult's ends. This oath also specifies a priority of Deep Ones as being superior to humanity, whose will is to be prioritized over any human or undeveloped hybrid member. The final oath is that of reproduction. To be in the cult, you cannot continue your human bloodline, as the entire purpose of Deep Ones is to convert humans. Both men and women of human lineage must have sexual intercourse with the fish folk. To join the Order is to not merely give up your humanity, but to declare war on humanity with every act you engage in. That absolutely includes sexual warfare. That's why in the podcast I talked about Father Dagon and Mother Hydra in. I used the example of an extreme misanthrope seeking the gods in question out of a genuine hatred for humanity, among other things. This hierarchy does become literal when Deep One hybrids are turned by the vampire sect known as Aquios, which we went over in our vampire video. We're not going over them here, but they effectively function as a theological offshoot or orthodox order of Dagon. A common prayer in the primary order reads, "In thy name let us behold the Father. From the depths of the waters I come, and from the depths the deep ones also have come. Hail to the ancient dreams, hail to Dagon." The information we've gathered as to what Dagonite Undersea Society resembles comes to us from a wide variety of Conan and Cthulhu mythos sources. They usually appear as large central stone pillars or engraved obelisks, used as places of worship in their center. These undersea civilizations have their various districts that themselves resemble more organized aquatic caves integrated into any ruins that may be nearby, with the caves themselves being coated in a black substance very similar to the unknown material which follows most great old ones, but an impure mixed version of it, containing mud from the ocean floor. This black substance, as well as evidence from the story, the temple, and the general nature of Cthulhu worship, shows us that they possess portals to other dimensions or realms in many cases. Usually at the very bottom of their city center or possibly on the outskirts for future military application. These may act as portals to other Deep One cities, or to summon avatars of their gods. Their primary focus is on archaeology and underwater agriculture. Archaeology holds religious significance as, due to unknown events, older Deep Ones and their knowledge was lost, only living on through fragments their descendants inherit during their transformation period. The Rylaian language, which the Deep Ones speak, also possess words for born of the father and born of the mother, showing us that these inherited memories are bloodline-specific rather than shared through the entire race, usually going back to the grandparents or semi-immediate family of the individual, as demonstrated in our opening quote. This can also be seen as a way to connect further with Dagon to hopefully learn to think like their lost ancestors, thus him as well. The communal sense of property makes sense when the simple question is asked, what use is gold to ageless beings with a nearly unlimited food source who don't wear clothes? They may have a communal weapons stockpile, but this is the only use for the concept their biological drive necessitates. This even holds true in a nameless undersea Deep One society, which we will call Volusia, as they tried to recreate or adopt extinct human Volusian culture from the Thurian Age as a coping mechanism for their trauma. While peaceful, King Conan would encounter their sunken city years after the invasion of the Murgor worshippers on Aquilonia. In response to being hailed as a hero for bringing back an ancient culturally important jewel referred to as belonging to the people of the sea, Conan proceeded to take their king hostage, steal the rest of their treasure, and make it back to shore, killing a giant squid along the way with a sword he picked up during his single-handed sacking of the aquatic urbanites. While not being able to reproduce or grow their numbers, also being insane, this was an example of a Deep One civilization that was no threat to humanity. It's also very fitting for both the Conan universe and the Cthulhu mythos that psychosis, or separation from reality, was the only thing that was able to make a fishman tribe friendly. Because these fishmen genuinely believed they were Volusian, it also offers a perfect test case to see how strong their genetic influenced behavior is. Nature versus nurture can be answered with this test case. An interesting note here being that despite the king being referred to as such, he held no real authority over the other members of his tribe, and is more seen as an elder or older family member throughout his appearance. This shows that even in cases of communal insanity, a Deep One society cannot fully embrace human traditions or hierarchy, as after they change, they become fundamentally different beings in terms of psychology, with only a very extreme minority being able to resist their true calling, if not through insanity, then through suicide. A further note on property, as you may have inferred from the story, is that while most objects hold no value to them personally, their jewelry, which we will talk more about later, does. In the story The Temple, we see a group of human soldiers be taken to the bottom of the sea solely to reclaim one piece of ivory jewelry taken from a Deep One serving on the opposite side of a war. Lastly, on religion in mainstream Deep One society, while as we went over the view of gods can vary, it can be assumed that once a hybrid is no longer human, their religious worship goes from Dagon being the primary entity to Cthulhu being their main god, with Father Dagon and Mother Hydra being ancestor gods relative to their worldview. They now have a full trinity instead of only one or two gods, depending on the specific cult of Dagon. This would also show them being fully enlightened as to the mission they were created for, to better serve Cthulhu. The Shoggoth Tamer role, also called Shoggoth Taming in the Deep Tongue, as a reality in mainstream Undersea Society, requires its own section of this video, as it teaches us much about our amphibious antagonists, chiefly through the use of Rylaian, the language of the Great Old Ones, in the naming scheme of their cities, and the obvious need of sorcery to tame such a creature that elder magic is a very common part of their society. It becomes even more common when one understands the communal nature of the race, which also prizes knowledge over materialism we just went over. When we understand that elder magic tends to drive even the strongest of human minds insane, perhaps smaller offshoots such as the Yavolusians are part of a kind of Cthulhuian selection, a way of filtering out those unfit for the purpose they were made for. While not in danger of dying of old age, they are out of the way and could easily be taken out by larger schools of Deep One warriors. While there are many great feats that Deep Ones have accomplished, we have rarely ever seen them use magic outside of this school. This of course makes sense, as they are all the artificial grandchildren and servants of Cthulhu. The other reason for this is that when one considers that elder magic is effectively learning a totally alien form of science, history, and mathematics, we understand why there isn't much of an overlap with the more spiritual, less scientific schools. With that said, limited use of what could be considered demonology through the worship of Murgor, mesmerism through illusionary manipulation, or hypnotism and shamanism through a connection to sea beasts have been witnessed. Another way to describe elder magic as used by the Deep Ones would be biopunk technology mixed with guided psychic ability. In the case of a Shoggoth Taming, to tame a Shoggoth, they would have to make flesh and psychic alterations in a kind of magical surgery, first to attain a connection to it, which lasts until one of them dies, causing intense psychic trauma to the other. A similar connection can be established by Shoggoth Tamers with other beasts. With this technique, fully formed Deep Ones may be able to turn giant squids or whales into mass personal transport for an invasion of the surface, should they so choose. Now that we've covered the cornerstones of Deep One society, let's use what we know to construct models of what their undersea cities would be like on a day-to-day basis. Keep in mind that this is us assuming that this is a fully Deep One crafted city rather than the sunken city present in Conan Exiles or Yavolusia, which already contain pre-sunken ruins. There are many Deep One cities mentioned, usually starting with a Ya, which translates loosely in Rylaian to be I. These can be Ya Gam Loa, or I am the wish of the Father, in later the currently far north Hyborian ice caps, or they can be the city featured in the Shadow over Innsmouth, which at this point in history would be off the coast of the Pictish wilderness, Ya Natheli, which can be translated to I am the servant beside. The cultural and religious center would be a giant pillar located in the heart of the communal city, around which would likely be sea caves and various protective structures which double as houses or places of residence. They would be black, brown, and green in the primary coloration, from the mix of black unknown substance, mud, and plants they would be crafted from. Common decoration would include brightly colored coral and glowing luminescent plants. The chief goal of these houses would be utilitarian, thus not belonging to any one fishman, serving as places to sleep, as when awake, most Deep Ones would engage in underwater agriculture, which would be both one of the few jobs and most common job in any of their societies. This includes farming undersea plants and likely herding schools of fish for later consumption. Carved on the central pillar or obelisk would be ancestral tales of Father Dagon and Mother Hydra, with idols to minor gods specific to that city around it. In addition to Shoggoth-aided farmers, one would also have warriors or guards of the city. Provided the city is amphibious in construction, meaning some areas being air-pocketed caves and others being fully submerged, bows would be possible, similar to the sunken city in Conan Exiles, but unlikely. More common in use would be spears, daggers, and, as we've seen from the drowned on the Isle of Sipta, fishing tridents. However, the sheer strength of a Deep One living in such an area would be enough to stop most intruders. Jewelry is very distinct, having much access to precious metals like gold and silver, but are also commonly made of ivory. These are used for ceremonial purposes and worn as what is likely a marker of their job or responsibility. The reason I say as a marker of their role in their society is that the utilitarianism would apply to natural strengths or weaknesses of an individual member of the species, so functions can be maintained. This can also be used to reconfirm the religious motivation of the jewelry. Messenger would also be a necessary role to keep up communication between the surface Dagon cult, or nest from their perspective, and their main city. The chief ventures or interests of most fully developed deep cities will be archaeology, as mentioned previously, so researchers as well as scavengers would make up a scientific cast of the society. Finally, you would have those Deep Ones who most use sorcery, which would be the Shoggoth Taming, aides to the Deep One priests and priests themselves. While no real hierarchy exists outside of the Esoteric Order of Dagon, priests would be the de facto leaders, at least in terms of strategy and organization, in terms of crisis or religious ceremonies. The time not spent in your assigned role in a Deep One society would be spent in a trance-like prayer or meditation to the creator god Cthulhu or ancestor gods to better gain enlightenment or closeness to what the Deep Ones would think of as perfection or divinity or serving their purpose. This is where the aspect of Deep Ones and the Great Old Ones being unknowable comes into play. We don't really know what their higher concept of divinity is. We can barely answer that for humans when it comes to our religious instinct. So, there you go. One pattern I find very interesting when studying the Deep Ones is that, like every other civilization in the Hyborian Age, they are at their best and most prosperous when following their traditional culture. Whether in the example of the followers of Murgor or the mentally ill Volusians, we see a breakdown of their prosperity. In the Volusian case, we see the halting of reproduction coming from an inability to continue with one's native culture and the heavy stunting of their survival instincts, allowing them to be beaten by the first opposing force that entered their domain. In the case of the Murgor followers, we see the loss of the Big Three, Cthulhu, Father Dagon, and Mother Hydra, as the center of their pantheon, likely out of promises of a faster victory over humanity. This loss of patience basically makes them enter a war they aren't prepared for and lose horribly. All while this is happening, mainstream Deep One society is going strong with a combination of ancestor worship, seeking to be good servants of the Mad God, and lucrative business deals with foolish mortals. Keeping to the Trinity makes it so that at any time the true children of Dagon could rise from the waves and fully overthrow human society. It's like the old phrase, if it isn't broke, don't try to do elder magic to alter its genetic structure. If you enjoyed this video, we have links below to help you find out more information on weird literature's oldest aquatic enemies. I fully recommend Sandy Peterson's video on Shoggoths and how to fight a Deep One, which were a great help in the construction of this video. If you'd like to support this work, you now can on Subscribestar. Our problems with the service have been resolved, and the link to it can now be found, as always, in the description box. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.